Hi there, welcome to the 5th video in this series where we'll be discussing 5 problems with socialism and why it always fails. In this video I'll discuss problem number 4, which is the legal problem. In my view, the law should apply equally to all citizens. But this is a problem with socialism. Now why do I think that? Stick around.
If you wanna stay with me.
Equality under the law means that no special dispensation exists for different interest groups. Socialism is founded on the entire principle of the government owning and controlling everything, and while all citizens may be equal, more or less, as part of the governed, this means that there is a two-tiered legal system. Now I am unable to take over your house, but governments may compulsorily acquire or simply take ownership over your home. See what happened in China before the 2008 Olympics, or in Brazil in the 2016 Olympics. More scary in recent weeks is the exercise of government power in countries such as India and Venezuela to criminalize the possession of larger banknotes of previously held legal currency. In the past, governments, including Australia, believe it or not, have confiscated physical gold and in recent times allowed banks to literally steal your savings, such as what happened in Cyprus and in Greece. Now this is called a bail-in. Bail-ins is where the banks are stealing their customers' money, sanctioned by the government and state legislature. Bail-outs is where the government uses the money it took by force from you, tax, and give it to the commercial banks or other entities such as car manufacturers to prop them up. This of course maintains unsustainable mono or duopolies. Not to mention a great number of other examples where governments misuse or abuse, in my opinion, the power that they have over the legal system domestically. In Europe, it spans beyond domestically elected parties and politicians to an unelected central legislature, pumping out 600 plus rules and regulations per day. Now perhaps slightly less benign but even more pervasive is the taxation system. Even in so-called democratic societies like ours, the government can simply force you to pay more tax and institute more laws, while any other citizen cannot simply lord it over others and decide to take someone's savings. Central governments seem quite capable of doing so, even in non-socialist states. Now to me, this poses a significant legal problem. The state can involuntarily take my money, force me out of my home and change the rules. But as ordinary citizen, I have no say in the matter, nor can I behave in the same way without repercussion. This means that the law does not apply equally to all citizens, and we are not all held by the same standard at all times. In fact, it gets worse. Government makes the law, interprets the law and enforces it. And history shows that the more power it has, the more corrupt it becomes in support of an elite minority. Furthermore, the more laws there are, the more complex it becomes, and the harder it is to comply, and the more the citizenry is disempowered. There are around the world literally millions of people in prison for victimless crimes, and this is because in the absence of a complainant, for example in the case of not wearing a bike helmet or having a parking fine and so forth, those petty crimes, the state takes that position, the position of complainant, and vehemently protects itself and supports its own system. Now I don't want to particularly dwell on self-defense rights and gun ownership, but the history is quite shocking, and anyone who does some basic research will see the dramatic massacres enacted by governments, mostly socialist, in murdering millions of its defenseless burghers. It is one example of where the inequality of rights can have dire consequences. In my view, politicians, government employees and public entities should be treated no differently under the law than any other. This includes the police, the defence force, the lawyers and the like. All citizens should be equal under the law and obey the same rules. Recognition and respect, of course, should come as a result of having been assigned a particular task in society, which is for the purpose of order, but that should not create a dispensation for additional powers or unequal appropriation of the law for them to abuse. Too many times do we see the arrogant abuse of powers exercised by law enforcement, and do they pursue petty, victimless crime with a strong hand. But it gets worse still. Due to one of the objectives of socialism being equal outcomes for all, and as discussed under the human problem, not all groups of people being the same, it requires the blunt force of law and bring about its homogeneous outcome. If it wasn't now obvious already, to ensure equal outcomes, governments must engage in a disproportionate application of the law to make this happen. Forcing equal numbers of females on all company boards, high welfare payments for those who don't work, and massive taxes for those who earn. Compulsory preferential treatment to perceived minority groups, silencing opposing views, prison for dissent, etc. You see, the only way to make equal outcomes happen is by forcing it, which requires compulsory relinquishing by those who are on the positive balance of disequilibrium and receiving for those on the negative side of the scales. In truth, there will never be a lack of some justifiable inequality correction in society until there is nothing left to distribute. Now, in my ideal world, a government should be small, have a limited budget based on voluntary contributions and income from your user pay scenarios, have a fixed scope and responsibility which does not compete with but behaves in the same way as private enterprise. And of course, fixed time frames. They also ought to be held to the same account as every individual and not be a distinct class of its own. Regulation and legislation should be kept to a minimum. I would also perhaps consider a low rate, flat tax applied to a broad base like income or sales tax to provide this baseline. I also believe that this would provide the best support for the economy as well as all socially for all Australian citizens. But we will discuss the economy in the next topic, so stick around and join us in the next video. Thank you.